Hi, this is the lesson of using Subquery. After completing this lesson, you should be able to do the following. Define subqueries. Describe the types of problems that the subqueries can solve. List the types of subqueries. Write single row and multiple row subqueries. In this topic you will learn subquery, the types, syntax, and guidelines. Single row subqueries. Group functions in a subquery. Having clause with subqueries. Multiple row subqueries. Use all or any operator. Null values in a subquery. Suppose you want to write a query to find out who earns a salary greater than Abel's salary. To solve this problem, you need two queries, one find how much Abel earns, and a second query to find who earns more than that amount. You can solve this problem by combining two queries, placing one query inside the other query. The inner query, or subquery, returns a value that is used by the outer query, or main query. A subquery is a select statement that is embedded in the clause of another select statement. You can build powerful statements out of simple ones by using subqueries. They can be very useful when you need to select rows from a table with a condition that depend on the data in the table itself. You can place the subquery in a number of SQL clauses, including the where clause, having clause, from clause. In the slide, the inner query determines the salary of employee Abel. The outer query takes the result of the inner query and uses this result to display all the employees who earn more than employee Abel. Guidelines for using subqueries. Enclose subqueries in parentheses. Place subqueries on the right side of the comparison condition for readability, however, the subquery can appear on either side of the comparison operator. Use single row operators with single row subqueries and multiple row operators with multiple row subqueries. There are two types of subqueries. Single row subqueries, queries that return only one row from the inner select statement. Multiple row subqueries, queries that return more than one row from the inner select statement. A single row subquery return one row from the inner select statement. This type of subquery uses a single row operator. The slide give the list of single row operators. Example, display the employees whose job ID is the same as that of employee 141. A select statement can be considered as a query block. The example in the slide displays employees who do the same job as Taylor, but earn more salary than him. The example consists of three query blocks, the outer query and two inner queries. The inner query block are executed first, producing the query results SA_reps and 8600, respectively. The outer query block is then processed and uses the values that were returned by the inner queries to complete its search conditions. Both inner queries return single values. This SQL statement is called a single row subquery. You can display data from a main query by using a group function in a subquery to return a single row. The subquery is in parentheses and is placed after the comparison condition. The example in the slide displays the employee last name, job ID, and salary of all employees whose salary is equal to the minimum salary. The min group function returns a single value, 2500, to the outer query. You can use subqueries not only in the where clause, but also in the having clause. The Oracle server executes the subquery and the results are returned into the having clause of the main query. The SQL statement in the slide displays all the departments that have a minimum salary greater than that of Department 50. A common error with subqueries occurs when more than one row is returned for a single row subquery. In the SQL statement in the slide, the subquery contains a group by clause, which implies that the subquery will return multiple rows, one for each group that it finds. In this case, the results of the subquery are 4,400, 6,000, 2,500, 4,200, 7,000, 17,000 and 8,300. The outer query those results and uses them in its where clause. The where clause contains an equal operator, a single row comparison operator that expects only one values. The equal operator cannot accept more than one value from the subquery and, therefore, generates the error. To correct this error, change the equal operator to in. A common problem with subqueries occurs when no rows returned by the inner query. The example in the slide show that there is no employee named Haas. So the subquery returns no rows. The outer query takes the results of the subquery, null, and uses these results in its where clause. The outer query find no employee with a job ID equal to null, and so returns no rows. Subqueries that return more than one row are called multiple row subqueries. You use a multiple row operator, instead of a single row operator with multiple row subquery. The multiple row operator expects one or more values. The subqueries in the slide is an example of SQL to find the employees who earn the same salary as the minimum salary for each department. The inner query is executed first, producing a query result. The main query block is then processed and uses the values that were returned by the inner query to complete its search condition. The any operator, and its synonym, the sum operator, compares a value to each value returned by a subquery. The slide example displays employees who are not IT programmers and whose salary is less than that of any IT programmer. The maximum salary that a programmer earns is 9,000. Less any means less than the maximum. More any means more than the minimum. Equal any is equivalent to in. The all operator compares a value to every value returned by a subquery. More all means more than the maximum and less all means less than the minimum. The not operator can be used within, any, and all operators. The slide example display employees whose salary is less than the salary of all employees with a job ID of it_prog and whose job is not it_prog. The SQL statement in the slide attempts to display all the employees who do not have any subordinates. Logically, this SQL statement should return 12 rows. However, the SQL statement does not return any rows. One of the values returned by the inner query is a null value, and, therefore, the entire query returns no row. So whenever null values are likely to be part of the results set of a subquery, do not use the not in operator. The not in operator is equivalent to not equal to all. In this lesson, you should have learned how to use subqueries. A subqueries is a select statement that is embedded in the clause of another SQL statement. Subqueries are useful when a query is based on a search criterion with unknown intermediate values.